Hi. Good evening, everyone. My name is Carmelo Ferlito, and I'm the CEO of the Center for Market Education, a think firm with offices in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and Jakarta, Indonesia. With this short video, which is inspired by, hopefully, by sound economics, which is the mission of the Center for Market Education, inspired by the simple principles of supply and demand, we will try to make sense by using economics of the feeling of unhappiness that is spreading among Indonesia population. We will try to do this without any political outrage or political leaning, but just trying to look at what happened with price dynamics in the latest years in Indonesia. Now, allow me to share a short presentation. Okay, here we are. So, what we try to do with this video is to link the protests that spread around Indonesia with certain feelings of unhappiness for the cost of living in the country. So, in fact, if we look at it, we struggle to find a real consistent motive behind the recent rallies in Jakarta. But if we talk to the people, a certain sentiment of general unhappiness for the so-called cost of living is very clear. And this was evident also after the recent GDP data release. If you remember, a few weeks ago, many struggled to see how it is possible for the economy to grow at 5% when people perceives growing difficulties in making ends meet. So now let's take a look at how prices are behaving in Indonesia and so why people, let's say, feel the pinch. Let's start with definition because I think in general people have a very misleading idea of what inflation is. Inflation, properly defined, is a persistent, so prolonged and generalized increase in the level of prices, which is due to the quantity of money, which is usually measured by the money supply aggregate called M2. So when the quantity of money grows faster than the output measured by GDP. And inflation manifests itself usually with a temporal lag that can goes up to 18 months from when the dichotomy between GDP and M2 emerge to when indeed we start to feel the pain of cost of living increasing. Now, what people are suffering now, and we will show this with the numbers very soon, is due to mainly to the money expansion which happened during the COVID-19 pandemic, when stay-at-home orders, lockdowns, forced the government to finance relief packages. And here is not a matter to, it's not the moment to say lockdown yes, lockdown not. This is not the point here. The point is that every policy has a cost. So lockdowns were costly and were paid with massive injections of money. And these injections of money are not free. They generate inflation. So when governments prepare policies, they should always do a very serious trade-off analysis. And this should be understood also by the people. When the people ask for subsidies, relief, cash aids, they should realize that the help that these packages, reliefs and aids and subsidies bring to them are very temporary, because if the quantity of money increase faster than the output, then the purchasing power of the people is actually deteriorating. They have the feeling, the impression that they have more money in hand, but the actual value of those money in hands is dropping and declining. Now, the Indonesian government release monthly data on price dynamics, and they take the following shape. This is a table which I downloaded from the Department of Statistics website. What I did is to take 15 years ago, so a long temporal framework. I took January 2010. Sorry, there is a mistake here in the slide. January 2010 as basis 100, and then I applied the monthly rate of inflation as measured by the government to see what happened next. So this is 2010 and not 2019. Apologies for that. What do we see? What do we obtain from that? Basically, we see that if we take January 2010 as basis, so equal 100, prices today are 255. But between 2010 and 2019, so before the pandemic, they only rose from 100 to 156. Then they rose to 157. Then they rose to 176 by the end of 2023 and to 232 by the end of 2024. And they are at 255 now. How is this possible? Prices increase by two and a half, by 1.5 times. We will see that the main culprit is the increased quantity of money. Let's not forget that we had indeed COVID packages, elections, and election always bring with them promises of more money and more plans for government spending. Now, here we have the graph. In orange, you can see the increase in the quantity of money from January 2010 until now. And in blue, you see the monthly increase in price, and you can clearly see the steep increase happening from 2024, so from here. What is happening, actually, what happened in those years? So what we see in the previous graph is that the price dynamics follow money supply dynamics with a lag. But there is more. Indeed, using the same data provided by the government, we find a strong correlation, 96.17% between prices and money supply. It means that the behavior of money supply strongly influence how prices behave later, which means the more or the faster the money supply increase, in particular when it increase more than GDP, the more prices will increase. And we will see this more in detail shortly with another table. And we will do that by using data from World Bank and trading economics. Let's repeat. We mentioned that inflation arises when money supply grows faster than the output. And there is a general consensus that inflation is on an unhealthy path when it is above 2%. This is quite a common way of thinking among economists. And again, let's take a look at the data. Okay, here we have a smaller time frame, the last 10 years. And let's see, as you can see, between 2015 and 2019, we always had the money supply growing faster than the output. And indeed, inflation was always above 2%. Then we have COVID. See how much the quantity of money increased in the first year of COVID, 12%, second year, 14%, and then even third year, more than 8%. And always, obviously, the quantity of money grew much faster than the GDP. The GDP in 2020 went down 2%, then slightly increased 3% in 2021, and rejumped at 5% in 2022. Obviously, you cannot see a steep price dynamics, high inflation during COVID. First, because we were during a crisis, and therefore there were recessionary pushes that pulled prices to grow, not to degrow. Prices were not declining, were just growing at a slower speed. But then again, as I mentioned, with a lag, we find a very high inflation, 5.5% in 2022. That means in the year following the pandemic and following the big increase in the quantity of money. Then you can see that in 2022, in 2023 and in 2024, then the GDP grows faster than the quantity of money, and inflation, in fact, 2023, 2024, and up to mid-2025 is slowing down. Prices are not decreasing again. Prices are just slowing down. Then we see that they are now going back to 2.5%. And in fact, you see that the difference between the increase in money supply and increase in GDP is narrowing. And the government is promising new packages of expenditures, while instead governments acted very wisely during 2023 and 2024 when the quantity of money was indeed decreased and the GDP grew faster. Here we see the same that we have seen in the table in the form of graph. In fact, you see that the healthy inflation is the light blue lines, and the actual inflation, which is the dark blue line, went below in the recent years, thanks to the fact that GDP, the green line, grew faster than the quantity of money. While these increase in money supply, orange line, bigger than GDP, in particular during COVID, has always brought higher inflation above the healthy level. So what we should conclude from this data? The table and the graph in the previous slides show us that when the gap between the growth of GDP and the growth of M2, so during COVID-19 period, then was at the peak, then the highest inflation of the past decade was generated, 5.5%, the highest rate of inflation of the past 10 years. The table and the graph also shows that inflation was brought under control when GDP started to outpace M2 again. This does not mean that the effect of the previous inflation are destroyed, and that's what the people are feeling now. It means that price growth is slowing down, but unfortunately, the previous growth will not be destroyed. We will need deflation, yes, but deflation is never politically appealing, and governments will not act in a way to bring deflation, although deflation is indeed necessary after a period of high prices like the one that followed COVID. So the effects of that monetary injection translated gradually with a lag into higher prices, and that is the pinch that people are feeling now, the sense of uneasiness that people have now with a time lag, the feeling that everything is expensive in the city and that the government is not taking care of that. But the reflection conducted so far should bring us to realize one thing, that as Milton Friedman was used to say, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. As governments control the emission of money through central bank, but also through through the political influence that they exercise on central bank, and through borrowing, this is the most important thing, governments are the only ones that can actually determine inflation. But inflation is politically rewarding because people always always ask something from the government. And so inflation can be stopped only with responsibility, not only from the government side, but also from the people side, from the people realizing that all the subsidies and aids that the government can spend for them are actually deteriorating their purchasing power. I hope that this explainer will help you to make sense a little bit of what is going on with the uneasiness, with the cost of living that is felt by many Indonesians. Here there are the references to some of the works that the Center for Market Education produced on this topic, both from an educational perspective and from a policy perspective. These papers are available for free download on our website. And if you want to know more and remain in touch with us, these are our social media channels. Feel free to reach us. Thank you very much and stay tuned with more news from the Center for Market Education. Remember, economics, sound economics matter. Thank you very much.